When it comes to the most entertaining Western action movies of the last 35 years, what's the first title that comes to mind? Tombstone? Unforgiven? The Quick and the Dead? Hell no, it's Young Guns by a country mile. Indeed, Christopher Kane's highly amusing and energetic tale of Billy the Kid and his participation with the Regulators in the Lincoln County War remains such a potent pop culture benchmark that almost 4 decades later, an official sequel entitled Guns 3, alias Billy the Kid, is currently in pre-production. Original Young Guns writer John Fusco is back on board, along with Emilio Estevez taking over the directorial saddle. As we look forward to the riotous return of the characters we love, it's time to recollect and celebrate the 35th anniversary of Young Guns by breaking down what inspired the movie, how it was developed, what went into the production, how historically accurate the story remains, and perhaps most enlightening, the treasure trove of on-set anecdotes and mischievous tomfoolery that the youthful cast thoroughly enjoyed while making the movie in the winter of 1988. So gear up, kick back, crack a brew, and stuff some chew. It's time to find out what the f happened to this movie. After completing work on his first screenplay for the movie Crossroads in 1986, writer John Fusco traveled to New Mexico, where Young Guns takes place, and spent 4 to 5 months researching the area. Fusco's primary focus was to learn more about the notorious gunslinger William H. Bonney, better known as Billy the Kid. After months of research, Fusco began writing a script about Billy the Kid's role in the 1878 Lincoln County War in New Mexico. To mainline the narrative and keep the cast manageable, Fusco made composites of several real-life historical figures and reduced the number of Regulators from 11 to 6. Director Christopher Kane, who happens to be the father of actor Dean Cain, became involved with Young Guns due to his previous relationship with Fusco, doing rewrites on Kane's urban crime thriller, The Principal. Around that time, Fusco showed Kane a draft of Young Guns and agreed to direct the movie after reading just 16 pages. Kane was also the one who suggested Emilio Estevez play Billy the Kid, based on their time working together on the 1985 movie That Was Then, This Is Now. Interestingly enough, for as enthusiastic as Kane was after reading the script, Fusco's employers at the time were not so impressed, as Fusco had a first-look deal at TriStar. However, TriStar disliked his script for Young Guns and decided not to make the movie, opening the door for Fusco to seek independent financing from Morgan Creek Productions, the company that eventually produced the movie. Joe Roth and James G. Robinson, owners of Morgan Creek, oversaw the making of the entire movie. Due to the reputational hit that Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate took, westerns were severely out of fashion by the late 80s. As such, raising $6 million of the budget proved to be incredibly difficult for Kane and Roth. Thanks to efforts, Kane was able to secure a modest production budget of roughly $12 million. In order to keep production costs low, Kane hired local non-union crew members in New Mexico to construct sets and recreate the visual tableau of 1878. Many adolescents with substance abuse addictions who could not be employed anywhere else were recruited to build the sets. With a decent shooting budget locked and loaded, principal photography on Young Guns commenced on February 8th, 1988, lasting until March. Considering the movie was released less than 5 months later on August 14th, we're talking about a lightning-quick editorial turnaround that helped get the movie into theaters as fast as possible. Young Guns was primarily filmed in New Mexico, with additional footage shot in Arizona. With fairly limited public production information beyond this point, now's a great time to lean into the fascinating trivial tidbits revealed by the cast in the DVD commentary. Along with Lou Diamond Phillips and Dermot Mulroney, actor Casey Siemaszko, who plays Charlie Baldry in the movie, spilled tons of interesting bits. For instance, the first thing the cast and crew filmed was the trailer, which was apparently not very uncommon in 1988. One of the first things that occurs in the movie is the recruitment of the Regulators by the suave and sophisticated English cattleman John Tunstall, played by Terrence Stamp. Interestingly, while Tunstall was a real person, he was much younger at the time of the Lincoln County War than he's depicted in the movie. According to reports, Tunstall was 24 at the time of his involvement, and was actually much younger than most of the regulators. When the film was made, Stamp was 49, more than double Tunstall's actual age. Conversely, Josiah Doc Scurlock, played by Kiefer Sutherland, was 31 during the war, while Sutherland was only 21. Although Doc is portrayed as the medic among the outlaw gang, in reality, Scurlock dropped out of med school in Louisiana and cited the humid weather as the reason he relocated to the Southwest. Charlie Sheen, who plays Dick Brewer in the film, was 22, while the real-life Brewer was 27. The youngest member of the regulators in real life was Billy the Kid, who was 20 years old during the events depicted in the movie. Emilio Estevez, meanwhile, was 25. Interestingly enough, in 2016, Phillips revealed that Sean Penn was offered the role of Billy the Kid, but had to decline due to legal trouble. Meanwhile, Patrick Swayze was offered the role of Dick Brewer, but was no longer interested in doing a Brat Pack style ensemble at that stage in his career. As for Phillips' own role as Chavez, he met with Fusco and producers during the casting process in the belief that they wanted him to audition for the part. However, after simply explaining the character to Phillips, Kane asked, well, at that point, Phillips knew he was being offered the role without an audition. One of the next big events in the film takes place in town that night, where the self-proclaimed pugilist Charlie is seen fighting one of Lawrence Murphy's men to protect Tunstall. Believe it or not, none of the fight scenes in the film were choreographed beforehand. All of the gunfights and hand-to-hand skirmishes were improvised on the spot. The actors didn't even have marks to hit during the fights. Speaking of Murphy, one of the significant differences between the movie and real events was his role as a fearsome antagonist during the Lincoln County War. In reality, Murphy contracted terminal cancer by the time the war even took place. Following Tunstall's death in the film, the Young Guns are deputized and immediately go after the arrest of Henry Hill. The background extras in the barroom scene were played by real-life Hells Angels members, including Vice President Cisco Valderrama. The same intimidating bikers were subsequently used as extra security on the set during the filming of the final battle, when the crowds of onlookers became far too big. What's truly hilarious about the Henry Hill arrest was that after the shootout took place and the regulators rode out, Charlie Sheen's horse stormed off and the actor had no clue how to stop it. Sheen was reportedly a horrible horseback rider and constantly needed assistance to make it appear otherwise. In fact, the crew had to strap Sheen down with a rope tied to the saddle to make sure he didn't fall again. When the actors were learning how to ride horses before filming began, they played a game of tag on horseback to get familiar with the process. This sense of adolescent playtime would not only persist, but set the tone of camaraderie among the actors, which is clearly visible on screen. In fact, Estevez was extremely lonely and emotionally depressed while making the movie, so soon after a heartbreaking separation from his girlfriend. As a result, Phillips would often cheer up his co-star. In one instance, Phillips had the wardrobe and makeup departments dress up a live sheep in a corset and little garter belt to deliver it to Estevez's trailer. Phillips also revealed that it was Estevez who launched a full-fledged prank war on the first days of filming, which set off the slew of sophomoric hijinks to come. For instance, Estevez had arranged care packages to be delivered to his cast members, claiming they were from the studio. Along with a letter thanking them for doing the movie, Estevez sent his co-stars a box full of cow manure. Once the cast caught wind that Estevez was behind the charade, an endless parade of on-set practical joking ensued. Indeed, part of the tight-knit bond of the regulators seen in the film derived from the actors enjoying their company in between takes. The cast would often play guitar on downtime and sing and dance. And when they got drunk together, the cast would often force Lou Diamond Phillips to sing La Bamba. There was also a bar in the constructed town that had a pool table the cast would play routinely, which helped them become closer. They also went skiing and played Pictionary. The actors bonded so well while making the movie that many of them had no qualms about putting their co-stars on blast in the commentary. For example, a bloody wound on Charlie Sheen's face in the opening sequence was the result of a runaway zit. Efforts were made to cover it up and make it appear as if he sustained the scar before the events of the movie. At one point, Mulroney pokes fun at Estevez for wearing lifts in his cowboy boots to make him look taller, questioning why he would do such a thing when Billy the Kid was notorious for being small in stature. Estevez's lifts can actually be seen during the nighttime festivities in Lincoln during the first act of the movie. Another Another amusing aside relates to the first barroom shootout. To increase the sound of the gunshots, ceramic plaster wadding was jammed into the blank bullets. However, the plaster began to spray the actors while filming. Estevez was blasted in the face, and Mulroney was tagged in the shoulder blade. This was deemed dangerous enough to halt filming to tend to Estevez and ensure he was fit to continue. Speaking of Mulroney in danger, he's chewing real tobacco in the movie as he refused to chew Tootsie Rolls as a substitute on the grounds they're bad for his teeth. The next notable moment in the movie comes when Billy goes against his crew's wishes and kills McCloskey and several of his unarmed men in cold blood. To simulate McCloskey's brains being blown out, ground beef was used as a prop. Baker, the victim who gets a knife lethally thrown at him by Chavez, was played by Cody Palance, the son of Jack, the veteran actor who plays Murphy in the movie. Following the death of McCloskey, Chavez guides the regulators on a journey through the spirit world as they embark on a hallucinatory peyote trip. Funnily enough, a can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup was used as the peyote. While approaching the indigenous campground inside the spirit world, Doc is seen leading the gang with his face fully shrouded by a black bandana mask. Get this, that was not Kiefer Sutherland under the mask. Kiefer had actually left the set early in the morning, as he had actually left to help his wife deliver their baby. Instead, it was Sutherland's stunt double in disguise who leads the gang into the camp. Meanwhile, the reason Chavez moves so slowly on the 30-foot cliff in the spirit world is due to Phillips' crippling fear of heights. Later, during Chavez's rousing speech relating to his slain Navajo family, Phillips had a feverish temperature of 104 degrees and went to the doctor the night before. Unwilling to pass on his big speech, Phillips sucked it up and completed the scene on schedule. After a brief respite, the regulators violently confront Sheriff Brady and his men, have their badges stripped, and become outlaws. Afterward, Charlie is seen visiting a brothel in the movie. In the original extended version of the scene, Charlie learns that the prostitute he visits is actually his mother before relaying the news to the boys. Before the epic final showdown at McSween's house that's loaded with cameos, the regulators enjoy some rest and bathe in a hot spring. The bath had to be dug by hand in the desert sand. One of the things that goes unnoticed about the movie is how freezing cold New Mexico was in the winter of '88. Great efforts were made to make the film appear hot, dusty, and sweaty, but in reality, the actors were freezing. For the outdoor bathtub scene, crew members had to pour hot water into the tub in between takes. In the same scene, Billy reads a news report about himself and laughs off the description by saying, "I ain't left-handed." This is a running gag in the movie and an in-joke of sorts relating to the real Billy the Kid. Because Billy was often photographed in tin-type pictures in the 19th century, the image was routinely flipped. This made the public believe that Billy was a lefty, when in fact he was right-handed. Another misperception about Billy the Kid is that his real name is William H. Bonney. The movie accurately notes that this is just one of many aliases he used. His real name, Henry McHardy. While on the topic of bathtubs, the following scene finds Billy bathing indoors while reciting a letter for Doc to write to President Hayes. Estevez was pulling a full-on Brando during this scene. That is, to make it appear as if he was coming up with the words on the spot, Estevez refused to learn his lines. Instead, the lines were written on large cue cards and held up by a crew member for Estevez to read while cameras roll. If you look closely, you can see Estevez's eyes scrolling side to side while he's reading those cards. Once the gang flees to Mexico, real-life lawman Pat Garrett arrives and warns Billy that Murphy's men are hot on the tail. The actor who plays Pat Garrett is Patrick Wayne, son of legendary Western star John Wayne. As mentioned before, the final gun battle between the regulators and John Kinney's men is loaded with cool, easy-to-miss details. For instance, when McSween is finally blown away with a Gatling gun, actor Terry O'Quinn was not rigged with squib packs. This was done deliberately to avoid an X rating, given the amount of graphic bloodshed seen in the movie up until now. Speaking of squibs, the final shootout required Kiefer Sutherland to wear an entire vest rigged with them. Sutherland was meant to trigger the device himself by pressing a hidden button to detonate the explosives. However, when cameras were rolling, the device accidentally went off when Sutherland mounted his horse and left the actor covered in fake blood. Once the regulators are trapped in the burning house, they put up their final stand by hiding Billy in the trunk and tossing him out of the house to mount an ambush. Believe it or not, at 1 hour, 39 minutes and 18 seconds into the movie, Tom Cruise appears in a disguised cameo as one of Murphy's henchmen, replete with a mustache, cowboy hat, pistol, and bandana. Having never been in a movie western before, Cruise happily agreed to briefly appear in the film to support his buddies. Young Guns also marked the first time Cruise was ever rigged with squibs. While swift and easy to miss, Cruise is the 4th man shot and killed by Charlie during the ferocious finale. As for Charlie Baldry, the movie ends with him going out in a blaze of glory by shooting John Kinney and dying in the process. In reality, that Charlie survived the Lincoln County War and died later in a gunfight in Stinking Springs, New Mexico. The event was depicted in Young Guns 2. Billy the Kid died 7 months later, and they were laid beside each other in the old Fort Sumner Cemetery. Similarly, the movie depicts the death of Dirty Steve in the brutal final shootout. This too was made up for dramatic purposes. In reality, Dirty Steve also survived the war and fled from New Mexico to Denver, Colorado. His ultimate fate still unknown more than a century later. While not nearly as exciting as Tom Cruise's secret cameo, country western singer Randy Travis can also be seen in the film as the Gatling gun operator that takes McSween's life during the final shootout. Travis actually wrote an original song called Young Guns for the movie, but it was discarded and used for the sequel instead. Meanwhile, James Horner composed an original score for the movie that was also completely dismissed, after Chris Kane deemed it too Irish sounding and opted for more of a Western-influenced rock soundtrack instead. However, just as cool as finding Cruise's cameo in the film is spotting Emilio Estevez in disguise as one of Kinney's men in the finale. With his side of the gun battle already filmed, Estevez had nothing to do on set and just got bored. One last detail about the hyper-violent ending of Young Guns relates to slow-motion photography. Director Christopher Kane was adamant against shooting the final sequence in slow-mo, as he thought the trope was played out after Sam Peckinpah mastered it with The Wild Bunch. However, according to Phillips, quote, "This was before digital and they had to step print it at the end. They finally realized there's a reason you shoot it in slow motion. It's really dramatic and really cool. And so they went back and step printed it, which is why the last sequence gets a little grainy." Another amusing aside that can't go unmentioned is the fact that Warren G famously sampled Young Guns for his hit 1994 rap jam Regulate, featuring Nate Dogg. Simasco later revealed that he's never heard the song before in his life and had no idea his speech was featured so prominently during its intro. Not for nothing, but one of the oddest things about Young Guns is the differing runtime of the movie according to various publications. For instance, IMDb lists the film as running 107 minutes. However, the movie's Wikipedia page claims a runtime of 103. The bizarre discrepancy was noticed by AFI, who reviewed a print of the film that lasted 106. In AFI's reporting, they noted that the original New York Times review of the film listed a runtime of 97, while a review from The Hollywood Reporter claimed a duration of 102 minutes. Whatever the cause of the mysterious runtime, the next time you watch the movie, try to track how long that sucker really lasts. Young Guns was released theatrically on August 12, 1988. Despite drawing mixed reviews from critics, the film opened at #1 and went on to become a commercial hit, tripling its budget to earn a total of $45.6 million internationally. The movie was deemed successful enough to warrant a sequel, 1990's Young Guns 2. Many of the surviving characters from the first film reprised their roles, as did John Fusco. However, Chris Kane was replaced by director Jeff Murphy. While not quite on par with the original, Young Guns 2 cemented the franchise as a beloved touchstone in the 80s and 90s. Both films remained popular enough to justify the long-awaited Guns 3, alias Billy the Kid, which is still currently in development. Emilio Estevez is poised to direct the film from a script he co-wrote with John Fusco. As of now, Lou Diamond Phillips is set to return as Jose Chavez y Chavez, and Estevez will reprise his role as Billy the Kid. Additionally, Christian Slater will also play Arkansas Dave once more following Young Guns 2. While details about the plot of Guns 3 are unknown, it may take longer to hit the screen than expected. As Phillips said, the film is in limbo right now. It was chugging along there for a minute, but then I think they got into the right situation. It's not dead, but it's not happening right now. And expanding further, Phillips stated that he already read the wonderful script by Estevez, and that it's similar in spirit to Top Gun Maverick in terms of legacy. Although Billy the Kid and Chavez appear to die at the end of Young Guns 2, Phillips contends that their corpses were never actually seen in the film, and so their return really isn't that far-fetched. And so that's what the happened to Young Guns. The film was clearly a lot of fun to make, and the final results show. Despite filming for 2 months in the frigid New Mexico winter and having a few on-set mishaps, injuries, and illnesses, kept the production afloat with his steady hand. And the youthful cast bonded so naturally while making the movie that many have since become lifelong friends. The movie might have been panned by some critics at the time, but because it struck such a resonant chord among the masses, the movie still remains incredibly popular 35 years later, and still holds up as one of the most entertaining Western action films of the past 4 decades. Hopefully, Guns 3 doesn't tarnish the legacy, but rather adds to the intriguing mythos of the Regulator when it eventually blasts its way to the public. One of the hardest things to do in Hollywood is make a highly anticipated sequel that lives up to the original, much less surpasses it. But if you had a loaded 6-shooter pressed to your temple and had to answer as quickly and honestly as possible, what would you say the all-time best movie Western sequel happens to be? Sergio Leone's Dollar Trilogy certainly comes to mind, yet in terms of a Western that uses historical events to tell a compelling biographical tale, it's hard to eclipse the blistering entertainment value of Young Guns 2, a movie that continues the saga of William H. Bonney, aka Billy the Kid, and his gunslinging compatriots, the Regulators, following their valiant efforts fighting in the Lincoln County War. Released 2 years after the original, Young Guns 2 became nearly as successful as the original in terms of box office sales and critical reception. While some liberties were taken to increase the dramatic effect of the story, like its popular predecessor, Young Guns 2 largely stuck to historical facts regarding the Regulators' role in avenging John Tunstall and defeating notorious lawman Pat Garrett. Now that we've already gotten to the bottom of Young Guns' production history, we're back by popular demand to do the same for the scintillating sequel. Regulators, mount up. It's time to get this party started and figure out what the fuck happened to this movie. The first thing worth noting about Young Guns 2 is that it was directed by Jeff Murphy, who replaced Christopher Kane from the original. The movie was also originally titled Young Guns 2, Hellbent for Leather, but the subtitle was discarded. Despite Murphy taking the reins, the consistent creative force behind the sequel was John Fusco, the screenwriter of both movies, who went to great lengths researching the historical accuracy of the events depicted on screen. According to the DVD commentary, Fusco poured through real newspapers published between 1879 and 1881 and lifted direct dialogue spoken by Billy the Kid. For example, when Billy escapes from jail early in the movie, he casually shouts, "Hello, Bob," before blasting Bob Ollinger dead with his pistol. And this is exactly what Billy the Kid said. However, while most historians agree Billy shouted something before shooting Ollinger, some have claimed that Billy uttered "Howdy, Bob," and "Look up, old boy, and see what you get," before pulling the trigger. We'll analyze the movie's historical authenticity in greater depth later, but for now, it's also worth mentioning that Fusco makes a cameo appearance in the movie as the branded man inside the jail who has John Chisholm's initials, JC, emblazoned across his face. By the way, speaking of obscured faces, fans may have missed the fact that the film's narrator, Brushy Bill, is also played by Emilio Estevez. Estevez had problems convincing the producers to let him play the elderly role. As the studio sought to hire another actor to play Brushy Bill, Estevez went off on his own and hired a makeup artist and dialect coach to help him develop the character. In the end, Estevez was so convincing as Brushy Bill that he not only fooled a group of strangers outside the set by playing dominoes, but the studio was so impressed that they allowed him to play dual roles. As suggested at the end of the movie, many historical figures have gone on record stating that their belief is that Brushy Bill Roberts is in fact Billy the Kid. Although they don't appear in the film, several members of Jesse Evans' gang, who knew Billy the Kid in real life, signed legal affidavits at the time verifying their belief. In 1990, a thorough examination was conducted at the Laboratory for Vision Studies and the Advanced Graphic Laboratory at the University of Texas. Utilizing the same facial recognition technology as the FBI and CIA, the study compared photos of a 14-year-old Brushy Bill with the infamous tintype photo of Billy the Kid taken in 1879. According to the results, a photograph of Brushy Bill taken when he was 71 years old was a 93% match for Billy the Kid. That said, there is no way of telling for certain if Billy the Kid and Brushy Bill were one and the same. Principal photography on Young Guns 2 officially began on January 19th, 1990, and lasted until March 24th. Like the first film, the 3-month film shoot took place in the frigid winter months, and great efforts were made to make it look as if the actors were drenched in sweat from the desert heat rather than freezing their asses off. It's also worth noting that Young Guns 2 was filmed throughout New Mexico and Arizona, with Santa Fe and Tucson serving as the primary locations. As most fans recall, one of the new characters added to Young Guns 2 includes Arkansas Dave Rudabaugh, played by Christian Slater. The character was a real-life gunslinger and outlaw who really did join the regulators following the Lincoln County War. Also known retroactively as Dirty Dave for his aversion to washing his body, it's worth noting that he was 25 years old during the real events depicted in the movie, while Slater himself was only 20. Conversely, Estevez was 27 at the time of filming, while Billy the Kid was only 21 during the post-war dust-up, with John Chisholm and Pat Garrett. Of course, Chisholm is played by James Coburn in Young Guns 2, the same actor who notoriously played Pat Garrett in Sam Peckinpah's classic western Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid. Even more fascinating, in the Peckinpah film, Coburn utters the line, "Why don't you take your money, shove it up your ass, and set fire to it?" In Young Guns 2, Coburn states a nearly identical line. "Well, you can take those figures and shove them up your arrogant little ass and set fire to them." It's a nice little homage to two interrelated characters played by the same actor in two different movies. One of Arkansas Dave's most memorable scenes comes when he insults Chavez E. Chavez, played once more by Lou Diamond Phillips, prompting an intense knife fight between the two men. The shot of Arkansas Dave stabbing Chavez in the arm with a knife was added at the last minute because of Phillips' real broken arm, which he sustained earlier in production due to an accident involving an unruly nag. According to Phillips in Celebrity Close Calls, the injurious mishap occurred on set after he was told a new scene that was not part of the script was being created on the spot. It takes place around the getaway scene that occurs after the regulators confront Garrett and his men. Chavez and Billy the Kid were meant to meet in an alley on horseback before darting in opposite directions. Billy was meant to shoot the handcuffs worn by Chavez and free him in the process. According to Phillips, he was ordered to ride an aggressive horse named Arrow during this scene. Because of the impromptu nature of the last-minute sequence, the prop master failed to rig a breakaway noose and used an authentic one instead. Meanwhile, Phillips had plastic handcuffs wrapped around his wrist. When Estevez fired the squib, Arrow the horse freaked out and bolted in the opposite direction of where Phillips was supposed to hit his mark. Phillips was abruptly thrown from the horse onto the ground. However, the real noose was still swaddled around his neck and attached to the saddle horn. When Arrow went sprinting off in the New Mexico desert, Phillips was helplessly dragged behind the stallion for several feet. Phillips crashed headfirst through the wooden wheel of a giant Calistoga wagon on set and went barreling headlong into a stack of kindling, like a bowling ball through bowling pins. Phillips remained conscious throughout the entire ordeal, and at one point tried to shield himself from Arrow's horseshoes by putting his arm up to protect himself. Alas, Arrow's hoof shattered Phillips' ulna bone in 4 places. The compound fracture was so severe that bones were sticking out of his forearm in 2 places. Phillips legitimately thought he was going to die while this was happening, and had a spiritual moment of clarity as his life passed before his eyes while staring up at the sky. Moments later, when Arrow appeared to have stopped, the horse ran through a large railroad. Phillips bashed his knee against the railroad tie and busted his kneecap on the spot. Luckily, the force of the collision spun Phillips around hard enough to break the noose and finally set him free. As he lay in silence in a dismantled heap, Phillips continued to believe he was dead until the medics arrived on set, and his sense of shock soon turned to immense physical pain. The near-fatal injury remains one of the most notorious production mishaps on record, and marks one of the biggest hurdles Phillips and the rest of the cast and crew had to overcome. On a much lighter note, those who saw our video for What the Happened to Young Guns may recall a hilarious aside regarding the practical joking that occurred on the set. Well, the same sort of shenanigans took place while making the sequel. According to the DVD commentary, Estevez got revenge on cast member Kiefer Sutherland by secretly slipping a naked Baby Ruth candy bar into the bathtub during a scene in which Doc Scurlock, played by Sutherland, washes himself. The same prank was pulled on Estevez while making the original Young Guns, and when it came time to make the sequel, Estevez couldn't resist the urge to continue the juvenile tomfoolery. Frankly, the sophomoric charades drew the cast closer, and there's a palpable on-screen camaraderie between them as a result. Now, before delving into the historical accuracy of the film and how much creative license was taken, one can't talk about Young Guns 2 without mentioning the memorable music. Although the film is technically composed by Alan Silvestri, who also scored the musical theme for Back to the Future Part 3 the same year, rock and roll superstar Jon Bon Jovi made the most lasting contribution to the soundtrack. And here's how it all went down. During pre-production on Young Guns 2, Estevez personally contacted Bon Jovi and asked him for permission to use his iconic 1986 song, Wanted, Dead or Alive, in the movie. According to Fusco, he wrote the original Young Guns script while constantly listening to Wanted. Meanwhile, the cast constantly played the song on set while making the movie. Although Bon Jovi was a huge fan of the first film and was eager to participate in the sequel, he declined Estevez's offer, stating that he felt the lyrics to the songs weren't quite right for the movie. However, Bon Jovi was so inspired to contribute to the movie that he rapidly wrote the song Blaze of Glory. According to sources, Bon Jovi performed the song on an acoustic guitar in front of Estevez and Fusco in the New Mexico desert. In addition to establishing a smoky soundscape needed to bring the film and place of the story to life, Blaze of Glory went on to become the #1 hit on the Billboard Hot 100. Blaze of Glory also won the 1991 Golden Globe for Best Original Song featured in a motion picture and was also nominated for the Oscar. Subsequently, Bon Jovi named his debut solo album Blaze of Glory, which included the popular title track, as well as several other songs inspired by events depicted in the movie. One thing fans may not know is that one of the greatest guitarists ever, Jeff Beck, plays lead guitar on Blaze of Glory, a collaboration that came about after Bon Jovi personally recruited Beck to record. The Young Guns 2 soundtrack charted #3 in the US. In the UK, the album was officially released under the title Young Guns 2 Blaze of Glory. Even cooler, much like Tom Cruise did in the first film, Bon Jovi makes a disguised cameo in the sequel. He appears as a non-speaking bandit who is seen attempting to escape from the prison pit next to Doc, Chavez, and the Branded Man as the lynch mob arrives. For those who've yet to spot him, Bon Jovi appears on screen roughly 28 minutes and 8 seconds into the movie when his character is blasted in the chest with a gun and sent flying backward through the western air. Speaking of the music of Young Guns 2, some fans may have noticed that the term Mexican Blackbird, used to describe a biracial sex worker in the film, is named after a 1975 ZZ Top song. Meanwhile, during the bordello scene, famed porn star Ginger Lynn appears as a prostitute named Dove. Okay, so now is as good a time as any to examine the historical accuracy of the events portrayed in Young Guns 2. In the film, once Billy and his gang flee the mob, they are eventually ambushed by Garrett and his men at Stinking Springs. During the ambush, Doc is shot in the chest and dies. However, this actually happened to Charlie Baldry in real life. Baldry was a member of the Regulators who was shot and killed differently in the original Young Guns. According to reports, the reason Doc was shot and killed during the ambush had to do with Kiefer Sutherland's busy acting schedule. Sutherland initially turned down Young Guns 2 and only agreed to reprise his role as Doc as long as his character died in the ambush. This way, Sutherland could wrap his part early and accommodate his busy schedule for other projects. However, Fusco's original screenplay included Doc's real-life fate, which included fleeing to Texas with his bride before dying of natural causes in 1929, age 80. Fusco was adamant about keeping the historical facts in the script and was not happy with Sutherland's demand to have Doc die in the ambush. However, Fusco ended up rewriting the scene to accommodate his actor's wishes. Similarly, Chavez's death is depicted much differently in the film than in reality. In the movie, Chavez slowly succumbs to a gunshot wound he sustains from Garrett's men in Stinking Springs. In reality, Chavez survived the Lincoln County Wars and lived until 1924. By all accounts, Chavez died peacefully in his bed in New Mexico at the age of 72. Funnily enough, because Chavez isn't actually seen dead in Young Guns 2, Lou Simon Phillips has argued that he never actually died, which is why he's poised to reprise the role in the hotly anticipated sequel, Guns 3, alias Billy the Kid. But more on that in a minute. Another minor inconsistency in the film relates to Tom O'Folliard, the young Irish gunslinger played by 14-year-old Balthazar Getty. While O'Folliard was really shot and killed by Garrett, he was actually 20 to 21 years old at the time. O'Folliard was also from Texas, not Pennsylvania as stated in the movie. Meanwhile, Garrett is appointed as the Lincoln County Sheriff by the Santa Fe Ring. In reality, Garrett became sheriff after winning an election with a vote of 320 to 179. As for Arkansas Dave, his real-life fate was also altered. Remember, Dave flees from Mexico just before the Stinking Springs ambush occurs. In reality, Dave did not successfully escape from Garrett and his men. Instead, Arkansas Dave was captured and imprisoned along with Billy the Kid. After being transported to Santa Fe, Dave was sentenced to hang for his crimes in February 1881. However, Dave eventually escaped from prison and fled to Arizona, where he joined the Clanton gang and fought notorious lawman Wyatt Earp. All told, Dave didn't make his way to Mexico until 1886, where he was ultimately shot to death and beheaded. Yet, somehow, Christian Slater is poised to reprise his role as Arkansas Dave in the upcoming Guns 3 sequel. Now, the most controversial difference between fact and fiction relates to the mysterious death of Billy the Kid. In the movie, Billy is shot in the back by Garrett and dies from his gunshot wounds. But when the film cuts to the present day in 1950, Billy is revealed to have survived and assumed the identity of Brushy Bill. To this day, nobody knows for sure how Billy the Kid died, where he died, or how old he was at the time. Many have argued that Garrett staged the death of his longtime frenemy and allowed Billy to escape unharmed. Decades of unsubstantiated rumors persisted, with many people even claiming to be Billy the Kid, including Ollie P. Roberts, the real Brushy Bill. Of course, with various claims and only one verified photo of Billy the Kid on record, it's nearly impossible to know for sure what really happened to the infamous outlaw. Even the two eyewitnesses who were present during the alleged killing were unsure what they even saw. The witnesses include Garrett's deputies, John W. Poe, played by Viggo Mortensen, and Thomas McKinney, who's absent from the movie. As soon as Garrett allegedly shot Billy, Poe claimed he hit the wrong man due to the darkness and inability to see the target. Garrett pushed back, claiming he could recognize Billy's voice. However, Poe and McKinney only heard whispering and felt it was impossible for Garrett to accurately identify Billy. Despite publicly agreeing with Garrett at the time, both Poe and McKinney recanted their statements and went to the grave believing that Garrett shot someone other than Billy the Kid, fueling further speculation about his survival that continues to this day. One thing that may surprise fans of Young Guns 2 is that, financially, the movie performed better than the original. Although Young Guns 2 received far worse critical reviews than the original, the movie grossed $59 million worldwide, against a modest $15 budget. By comparison, the original Young Guns grossed $45.6 million globally against a $13 budget. Yet, despite the financial success of the sequel, the lackluster reviews and killed-off characters prevented a third movie from ever happening. That is, until 2021, when Fusco unveiled a teaser poster for Young Guns 3, alias Billy the Kid. The potential sequel has lingered in development for the past 2 years, with Phillips providing an update to Entertainment Weekly back in May. Now titled Guns 3, alias Billy the Kid, Estevez is scheduled to direct the film from a script he co-wrote with Fusco. Along with Billy the Kid and Chavez y Chavez, Arkansas Dave is set to return. Although the plot is unknown at this time, Phillips told Entertainment Weekly that Guns 3 is currently, quote, in limbo right now. It was chugging along there for a minute, but then I think they got into a rights situation. It's not dead, but it's not happening right now. Phillips also likened the wonderful script to Top Gun Maverick for the way it deals with the history and legacy of the characters. Phillips also maintains that Chavez y Chavez never actually died in Young Guns 2, teasing his fans by adding, "The advantage of that is myself and a couple of other people died off screen. The ones who got shot to bits, they're not coming back. But there were a few of us whose death was a little ambiguous, and you can kind of get around it." And so yes, Chavez would be back. In real life, the real Jose Chavez y Chavez lived to be an older man in his 70s, so at least history is on our side. And there you have it. That's more or less what the happened to Young Guns 2. The anecdotal asides from the star-studded cast reveal a fairly smooth production history, save for Lou Diamond Phillips' near-fatal injury that left him with a broken arm and busted kneecap. Of course, Kiefer Sutherland's busy schedule altered the historical accuracy of Doc's involvement with the regulators in the Lincoln County War, while other creative liberties were taken to streamline the story and condense the narrative to a sub-2-hour runtime. Although the movie didn't fare as well as the first one in terms of critical reception, the box office success eclipsed the original, and the sequel went on to become a popular cult classic thanks to the compelling true story, eminently quotable dialogue, and one badass Bon Jovi soundtrack. The real question now becomes, what the happened to Young Guns 3?